Hey there YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to go a little bit old school here. I haven't used this camera for this type of video in a little while. Hopefully you can't hear, I got the little fan circulating some air, so hopefully it's not too loud. Anyway, usually when I do kind of a midweek video, I do a lot of the screen share stuff lately. That's been kind of the way that I've approached it. And that's because usually I want to show you something on the screen. In this case, I just want to sit down and I want to chat a little bit. One other quick point I'll make just off the top. If I do go into multiple topics, I'll let you know in advance. If I do that, I will put a couple of timestamps in the description if it comes to that, so that you can skip ahead if there's something that interests you or something you'd rather listen to, so you can do that. I'll include some links to some recent videos and stuff as well, to a certain degree, including probably a link to the live stream. So I'm recording this on Thursday. Hopefully I'll have it up on the channel on Thursday. But then on Fridays, usually we have the live stream, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And we can talk about this, we can talk about anything else. This week hasn't been too crazy as far as hobby happenings, but I did have some stuff I was thinking about the last couple of days, and I did want to kind of lead that into its own separate video, or I wanted to chat about it for a little bit. Now, the thought that led into a lot of this, I'm just checking the one note that I did take. Yeah. So what kind of led me to thinking about this a little bit, and I did visit with Dave and Steve on the Insert Revolution podcast of the YouTube channel of the same name. And I was kind of alluding to some of these points that I wanted to kind of make a little bit in this video. And the thought process behind it, and like I said, if worse comes to worse, I can always elaborate on the live stream a little more. But the thought I was having was that as somebody who watches a lot of content, you know, sports card related content, vlogs and dealers and different things, and also pays attention to stuff on Instagram and all that, you do get a lot of variations of different things. And one of the benefits of doing your own content and doing a live stream and stuff like that is sometimes you'll have people pop in and chime in with a little bit of information. And one of the nice things is that I do chat with some folks that do go out to sports card shows, so I get a little bit of feedback from them. So that's really super useful. And then Mike O, who is on YouTube as a channel. If you're not familiar, you can check out Mike O. He does some really good stuff. He popped in for a couple of minutes and added a little bit in the chat and added a little bit of context as well. So I want to thank him for that. But it's always good to get the context. So a lot of these guys were giving me some feedback from the Philadelphia show. The one that I was paying attention to prior to that was the Dallas show. And even this weekend, we're going to have a virtual expo, which technically anybody can attend. It is free admission. I'm not going to treat it as the same. I'm going to separate that conversation out from what I want to talk about here, because to me, that a virtual show is a very different thing. But what my thought process is I wanted to talk basically about the overarching theme of momentum. And I think momentum is an appropriate thing to talk about given the current context of the sports card market as it stands at the time that I'm recording this video. If you check this out in a year, it might not make any sense to you. But at the time that I'm recording this video, right now a lot of things are in a bit of a downward trajectory in terms of cards. And by the way, it's not across the board. It depends. If you're collecting Vladimir Guerrero Jr. cards or selling them, as I have been selling a couple of pieces that I have, although I did build up quite a stockpile a couple of years back. So for me, I've been making money on those cards without any issue. eBay has given me different issues, but that's a separate conversation for another day. But the point is that if I'm buying cards that I was buying at 20, 30 bucks, you know, 2 years ago, and then I'm selling them for 100, 150, $200, or I was able to get them graded prior to a lot of the issues with PSA turning stuff around, and I was able to grade them, and I was able to sell it for 250, and even if I had been patient, some of those same cards, because I had some of those Topps Chrome refractors for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., including some of the tougher ones. I saw a couple of those ones that sold for upwards of $1,200, $1,300. So needless to say, I could have made even more money on it, but you know, I could cry over spilled milk, but the reality was I probably had maybe $30 or $40 into it, and I sold it for $300 or $400 at the time, and obviously now it would be more. So be it. C'est la vie. But the point is that if you're buying low enough, it's possible to win at a variety of price points. It doesn't have to be at the absolute apex, the peak. But some people are obviously on the opposite end of that spectrum, and for them, they were buying at the peak, and then as things started to go down for some of those people, it created a big problem for them. And where the momentum piece plays into it is you can look at the momentum from the perspective of the individual cards, individual sports. You can look at that. You can look at the overarching momentum. And an indicator of that type of momentum, and it leads into kind of what I was talking about a couple of minutes ago, was these card shows are not the be-all and end-all, but they're pretty good indicators in a certain way, from a live interaction standpoint, of where some people are feeling certain things are going. Because you can look at an analytics tool, you can see that downward chart, but then how does it manifest itself in person? Because you've got these card shows where these people are still kind of enthusiastic enough to go and visit, but how many deals are getting done? The answer is there are still some deals getting done. Like I said, nothing in sports cards is universal, and nothing in sports cards is ever across the board. Now, one other thing I'll say quickly is, unlike a lot of my videos, I will usually pick a thesis. I will pick I'll give my answer at some point, and then the whole video has been kind of breaking down and building the case. I'm not going to do that this time. And the reason is because, in all honesty, more so than just about anything else, when you're talking about momentum, you're talking about human psychology. Because momentum isn't just the actual momentum itself, it's how people respond to that momentum. Do they break against it, or do they kind of go with the flow and get, if the wave is big enough, they get cast out to sea? Is that what happens? Or do they fight against the current and try to get back to shore? You're going to see a little bit of both over the next couple of weeks and months. And we'll see what happens with that. And just as easily, the momentum could shift the other way. It is a little bit more difficult to do shift if the momentum starts picking up enough steam in one direction, but it is possible. You can have a momentous event, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the reason, like I said, that the card show thing to me was such an important piece is that you could kind of follow the breadcrumbs and follow how the momentum was going. Well, for a little while, it was going white hot. All these, shows were coming one after another, and you were seeing tons of these transactions, tons of these, and it was reflected in the content that you're seeing out there in YouTube land. It was reflected in the content you're seeing out there in podcasts, and it was reflected in the content you're seeing out there with vlogs. You were seeing all of that. A lot of those people are pretty quiet right now, and that's because the momentum has shifted a little bit. The perception shifted. One of the indicators for an individual card has been there was a recent sale a day or two ago now of a Michael Jordan rookie PSA 10 going at a PWCC auction on eBay for $180,000, which is a big decline from from $700,000 plus that it was going a couple of months back on a pair of golden auctions. The thing is, though, if you were a buyer 2 years ago, you could have gotten that card for $30,000. So even $180,000 is a big, significant increase versus where it would have been 2 years ago. But the second point is that eBay itself has certain issues with taking really big bids from a lot of folks. My understanding is that some folks were actually blocked from the ability to bid, so they may have been willing to go a little bit higher than that $180,000, so that may not be indicative of the market correctly. So you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt, and we'd have to see. It'd be interesting to see what a PSA 10 would go in a golden auction, where it's going to be properly promoted, and it's not just going to be a quick thing thrown up on eBay. Even for 7 days, most golden auctions, usually when they've got a bigger end card, they do at least a little bit of promotion to help it out a little bit. But anyway, so where this plays into the general malaise or the general feeling, the feeling is that the momentum has shifted against the current market. Now, from a collector perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's why I said this may go in a couple of directions, and if it does shift from this topic, I do want to touch on it a little bit more. Or I may make it its own separate video, or whatever the case may be. I'm kind of leaning in that direction, but let me see what happens before I finish we're hitting record here. The point that I want to get at is as we're watching the shows leading up to the National, so we've got until the end of July. The National may not be the end of this discussion. We may continue past the National, and more than likely we will. But even as we're heading into that, we're going to have a bunch of shows, local shows and regional shows and stuff like that. They're going to lead into it. They're all going to be nice little indicators. It's going to be following the breadcrumbs to see how the general feeling is show by show. Some of them are going to have some regional differences, so you may not get an across the board, but it's still good to know kind of what things are going on as you're proceeding along. Are transactions happening? The answer is probably there will be. But are transactions happening regularly? Is there a lot of traffic? Are a lot of moves being made? Is a lot of money changing hands? If a lot of money changing hands, and it's not like the last Dallas vlogs where you were seeing a lot of kind of cash trade deals that were helped to facilitate, moving some cards in addition to, where some people were not willing to commit the full amount in dollars because they were concerned about the moving and shifting prices of various comps and things like that. That's going to be an indicative if you do see that leading into the National. And one of the big litmus tests prior to the National is going to be that there's going to be another Dallas show. I can't recall the exact timing, but I feel like it's a week or two before the National. Now, some people may bypass the Dallas show and go to the National because they've been saving their money and been preparing for this big moment. Other people may go to Dallas and say, okay, well, I'm not going to bother with the National. And the latter position is interesting because Andy, Sports Card Investigator, did an excellent video not long ago, and I'll try to remember to put that in the description for you so that you can see his latest video on that. He was making the case of why he would not be interested from his perspective, one man's perspective, his rationale for why he wouldn't be going to the National, why he wouldn't be interested in that. And there were a lot of valid points as far as why that might not be interesting to you, depending on what your aims and targets are. If you want to meet up with friends and go hang out and chat and be in that environment, in that convention atmosphere, then it may still be worth it to you regardless. But if it is as busy as they claim it will be, it's going to be a logistical nightmare for some folks. If they haven't already booked their hotels or their flights or whatever the case may be, it may be a little bit of a nuisance to make those arrangements if a lot of the places are full. I don't have the answer to that because in Canada we're not open to the point that I would even bother attempting to go to the National by the end of July regardless. So for me, I'd be out no matter what. But even then, given the nature of the potential nature of it being as busy as it could be, the interest level is low for me. So I'm probably an outlier that way, but still, I don't think I'm alone. And like I said, Andy makes a great case why for some folks it might not make sense. It might not be an automatic, oh yeah, we should definitely go. Even though some folks are trying to present it as being the case. Obviously, there's a lot of good reasons why you might want to go, but there may be a lot of reasons why not. We have a lot of technology that can take care of finding different ways or communicating or being able to get cards or whatever the case may be, depending, again, what your aim is. But with this Dallas show right beforehand, does that hurt the Dallas show prior to the National? It very well could. And if it does, it plays into this whole momentum point I'm making. Once you get momentum either going up or momentum going down, it can take a lot to reverse course. Well, leading into the National, you're going to have this Dallas show that may be a little bit reduced or a little bit diminished by the mere proximity of this National show. And if that comes into play, well, then you're going to have the hobby side of it from a show perspective. You may be limping into the National, so you won't exactly be riding high on all this momentum heading into it. And I did hear, again, you will get a lot of it from the content if you listen. I was listening actually minutes before I started recording. I was finishing up the latest Lucas Tigers and Bronze podcast where they were talking with P. Ryan Collection, who has a lot of very interesting things to say on the hobby, and I do enjoy listening to his takes. And it was funny because towards the tail end of the conversation, part of the piece of the conversation came in that he was also making the case of why it might not be worthwhile to go to the National for him, or why he doesn't think it might be worthwhile. And then the hosts were, which makes it very interesting, they acknowledged that for them, it was a slam dunk for the last couple of months, but now it's a little bit nebulous. They didn't say definitively, oh yeah, we're not going, but they did say, like, we're not sure. We're not sure what our stance is. And that is interesting, and that's telling, because it's not like it's next week or in 2 weeks. There's a little bit of time left. If somebody wants to make some last-minute arrangements, it is still possible. But it is indicative if you've got a podcast that does daily podcasts that specifically has built up an audience talking about this, where they're expressing, maybe, maybe not, we'll see how it goes. Whereas other content providers are very enthusiastic and gung-ho about going to national, again, for various reasons they may have. It is tremendously interesting, though. It's not a universal, the hobby is not reacting universally to this. It isn't an automatic that everybody wants to go visit the national. Some people definitely do. Some people are super enthusiastic about it. And some people are a little bit more lukewarm. And some people are kind of like taking more of a wait and see. And even some others are like, it's kind of a hard pass for me. So it's one of those things where you're going to get a mixed bag. So if this idea, though, does follow and does flow, and we do kind of limp into the national, does that mean the national, fixes this? Does it wipe all this away? Do we suddenly, it reinvigorates and then restores the boom? Or is it just another step in the direction of, if the National is a little bit of a dud, and by the way, it doesn't mean it has to be bad, it doesn't mean nobody's making any sales. I'm sure plenty of people make sales. I'm sure plenty of people will be able to move inventory. But if it is not meeting expectations, this is like the whole stock market idea where I say momentum can play in a lot of different markets and a lot of different areas. A company's stock can drop in value even if it makes a profit, because the expectation was that it would make more profit. So if you didn't meet the expectation, it didn't matter that you still came out ahead. You didn't do as well as they thought you would. And that's where I say that, like, the National will be interesting, because I think a lot of folks are hinging a lot of bets on this. And if it isn't the greatest National ever, but it's a good National, or it's all right. And for some folks, it's kind of like a little bit slow, and they struggle to move some inventory, and they have to basically start going like, all right, we'll take some cash and trade deals, we'll take some inventory in order to try to keep things moving a little bit. And a lot of those big cash deals don't happen with the regularity and expectation with a ton of people out there with their cameras showing it. What kind of presentation are we going to get? What is the coverage from the show going to look like? What is the tenor that you're going to hear when people describe how their national went for 2021? That's what's going to be very interesting. So for somebody like me that's more of an observer from that perspective, it is going to be a tremendously interesting thing. That's why I'm not making a pronouncement, because you're basically trying to predict human behavior, and you're trying to predict how they're going to respond to all the stimulus and things leading into that event. Some people, I think, are going to already be predisposed to feel that it is going to be the greatest national ever, because for them, they basically psychologically need it to be. They wanted so badly, like they missed it last year and they wanted to go to this one. Maybe this is their first one. So for them psychologically, they're already predisposed to being like, this is the greatest one ever, no matter pretty much whatever happens. For other folks, they may have come in with these super high expectations, then suddenly find them crashing down to earth a little bit by comparison. How do they respond to that? Do they take it in stride and understand, hey, there's a lot of factors going into it, and there was a little bit of a slowdown going into that? Or is it a case where they're suddenly tremendously disappointed, and that disappointment manifests in how they present it to others? Because then if coming out of the National, things are still kind of limping along, we continue forward. The East Coast National, I think, is going to be going and happening in late August. There's going to be other shows down the pipeline. Even in Canada here, there's still a very real possibility that we may have the Fall Expo happening in person for the first time since 2019. And they're trying to make it into a 4-day event. Does that go off? Does that work? Trying to include an additional day, because you're basically trying to capitalize on all this momentum that was in place up until a little while ago, and it suddenly cooled off a little bit. I've got some thoughts on how that can also play into it, where you can kind of take advantage of it from the collective perspective. But I think I'll save that one. I think I'll save that for a separate video. Keep this one a little bit tight compared to some of my regular talking videos. So that'll be it. We'll probably do another one of these again where I get to chat about some of that. But for now, my question is this. I'm not going to make any pronouncements on where I feel that's going to be. I am going to observe as a very interested observer in the shows leading up to it, any coverage or vlogs or anything coming up leading into the National, and of course the National itself. But my curiosity is this. What do you think? Is the momentum kind of shifted to the point that it will kind of continue forward into the National? Do you expect the National to reverse it? Do you expect the National to be a continuation of that? Or do you expect it to start kind of trending back upward prior to the National in anticipation for it? A couple of different directions you could take on it. I'd be curious to see kind of what your take is. And we'll get a chance to talk, I think, a little bit more in the live stream and other things about what the grading companies, the issues they've been having, and some of those things have also played into it. And we'll kind of just get a chance to discuss it with a little bit more depth, kind of how that has played into the general tenor and feeling inside of the hobby, or the hobby economy, as I like to call it. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Any comments or questions are welcome as always. Check out the live stream on Friday if you get the chance. I'll always be happy to have some new folks pop in and join. And we'll catch you in the next one.